Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. And today we have 4 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: obnoxious store owner ripped me off by refusing to refund faulty goods. After also refusing to pay up after a customer judgment against him, sheriff seizes a ton of stock, and he's forced to pay up, or be out of pocket big time, after his goods are auctioned off for pennies on the dollar. The second story: I reported on my company to the DOL, and won. The third story: how, because of the firing of one person who left through the vein of stupid management, the company lost millions of dollars and went out of that business side. The fourth story: a-hole landlord ruined mail in my win. The first story is consequences for obnoxious store owner who refuses refund. This is a tale of a poor retail experience with a belligerent and obnoxious store owner who thought that he was above the law. These events took place some time ago and started when I noticed a couple of ties I bought were faulty. The fabric was bunching, which made the ties unpresentable, and they were only a couple of weeks old. At $50 each, these weren't expensive ties, but getting more than a couple of weeks' wear seemed reasonable. A friend with a background in the clothing industry looked at them and advised this was poor workmanship. Not expecting this to be a big deal, I headed to the clothing store to return them. Or rather, attempted to. I explained the issue to the store owner, showed him the state of the ties, and emphasized I was happy to swap them and wasn't necessarily looking for a refund. In my experience, exchanging goods is a straightforward process, particularly when the purchase was recent and the problem evident. But not here. For clarity, this was a small chain of clothing stores with what appeared to be a single owner, who I was dealing with. Immediately, this man became belligerent. He looked over the ties carefully and claimed nothing was wrong with them. I pointed out the obvious defects, to which he announced that ironing would sort it out. Like a cheap showman, he flourished an iron and went to work on the ties. When he finished, they were exactly the same. By now, I'd had enough, and told him I wasn't interested in wasting any more time, and I'll take a refund, thank you very much. At this point, he lost it and started screaming and gesticulating, claiming I was there to rip him off, etc. I took the worthless ties and left. Normally, I would have forgotten about it, as $100 isn't worth wasting a lot of time over. However, my employer was imploding due to the owner's infighting, and I had more time than usual on my hands. And given this guy's over-the-top attitude, I decided to file a complaint with the Government Consumer Board. Shortly, there was a hearing. The owner appeared to defend himself. I told my tale and showed the state of the ties to the arbitrator. Predictably, the owner was peeved and carried on like he was the aggrieved party. The arbitrator saw right through him, ruled in my favor, and he was instructed to refund my money. The following day, I showed up to collect my cash, and unsurprisingly, he refused to pay and suggested I go and reproduce with myself. So I contacted the board, who told me to take the judgment, I can't remember the exact term, to the sheriff's department, who would collect the money on my behalf. Weeks went by and I forgot all about it, when I was contacted by the board to come in and meet with the owner. In the meeting room was the arbitrator, the owner, and his wife. Now, as this guy, the owner, sat at the table, he was a partial shade of red, and a vein pulsing in his forehead was threatening to burst. I imagined he was peeved at being dragged in to actually pay up, but it was more than that. As I sat down, he started to rant. He owned a chain of stores, and the sheriff paid a visit to his most exclusive one, located next to a luxury hotel. Because of the address, this location sold more expensive goods than his other stores. I assumed the sheriff just rocked up and demanded payment. But no, in a case where the party hadn't paid up, the sheriff will seize goods to be auctioned for the debt. This is the fun part, for me anyway, because goods at auction fetch much lower than retail prices. The sheriff has discretion as to how much he takes. Consequently, he decided a fair amount of goods to seize was an entire rack of expensive suits. From the description, this might have been $10,000 worth of merchandise. Not only was the obnoxious owner out a ton of stock, but a sheriff had barged into his flagship store and created a ruckus, which wasn't exactly great for his brand. In the meeting, the owner was almost hyperventilating at the arbitrator, who calmly explained that he had chosen to ignore his obligation, and this was the consequence. His goods had yet to be auctioned, so he was given the option of paying now, and his suits would be returned to him. However, he would also have to pay additional fees for the sheriff's time and effort. Spluttering objections, he took out $100 and flung it across the table at me. I smiled graciously, took the money, and wished him well. I so love countries that have some sort of state consumer protection board with arbitrators and sheriffs to help collect debts. It must be Australia, right? That's awesome. Sounds like this store owner is a real piece of work. If I were him and you came to exchange ties or get a refund, I would apologize for the condition of the original ties and make the exchange. This owner has his head so far up his A. Glad you won and made him a little embarrassed. He needed a reality check. Also glad you kept your cool. I know it was hard, but by doing that you helped yourself even more. It also reminded me of a story I read a few years ago, where a large German telecom company decided to ignore a court ruling in favor of a client, and then law enforcement showed up at their headquarters and confiscated some high-volume printers and copiers. They paid. The second story is, filed a complaint with the Department of Labor over being misclassified as exempt from overtime pay. I work in a call center for a tech company. I recently realized that we're exempt employees, and I learned what that really means. We don't get overtime. That's it. We're told we don't qualify for overtime. That didn't seem right to me, so I researched what you need to qualify as exempt. Hint, it's not just being salary like they tell you. So there are different categories like executives, CEO, etc., professional doctors, lawyers, computer specialist, IT that keeps running 24/7, and the vaguest one, administrative. To qualify for the administrative employee exemption, all the following tests must be met. The employee must be compensated on a salary or fee basis, as defined in the regulations, at a rate not less than $684 per week. The employee's primary duty must be the performance of office or non-manual work, directly related to the management or general business operations of the employer or the employer's customers. And the employee's primary duties includes the exercise of discretion and independent judgment with respect to matters of significance. All three must be met. I meet number 1. Number 2 is basically for supervisors or managers, not me. Number 3, I have very little discretion and independent judgment besides how to solve something. But in no way do I have anything to do with any matters of significance. This is important. You must meet all 3, and everything in that third statement needs to apply. So I submitted a complaint to the Department of Labor, mostly because I wasn't sure if I was interpreting legalese correctly. They called me hours later to discuss and get a little more detail. While they can't give me anything concrete until they finish a full investigation, the guy was pretty sure that we should not be exempt. They will be contacting peers and managers to confirm job duties and to get records like our timesheets. So I'm hopeful that this will end with my whole support team not just getting overtime going forward, but getting back pay for previous overtime for the past 2 years. That's the statute of limitations. Because yes, they made us track our time, so there are records of all the overtime work that never got paid. There was a lot last year too from COVID-related issues and releases. Update. Today it came to fruition. We had a couple meetings with HR and legal. The first meeting was all the people that'll be getting back pay for the unpaid overtime. The second meeting was everyone whose job had been reclassified and will be getting overtime going forward. A lot of overlap between the two meetings. Even though we were salary, we had to track our time and what customers we worked on and how long. If you were smart enough to long your overtime there, even if it meant nothing at the time, then you'll be getting back pay for that. We will not have to be tracking the time on customers anymore either. That was a huge bonus, so a wasted time. As an added bonus, there's also apparently other roles and teams at the company that will soon get overtime too, not just support. But the best part was sitting there while the head counsel tried to explain why we didn't get overtime before, slowly cherry-picking his words to make sure they were legal, knowing that there's definitely grounds for a class action lawsuit for all the people that were told not to bother to report their overtime. They seem very amicable to anyone that could easily have a case, and I expect they'll give some more payouts just to prevent the suits. Please let this be a lesson. Use your resources. Get help from the organizations that can. You may not trust the government, but there are laws to protect certain rights. Use them. You deserve it. Don't let them take advantage of you. To the CEO, you're going to pay me more this year for the same job I did last year, because I didn't go across the street. I'm gonna stay here and make sure all of us are taken care of. I love this big juicy win. Knowledge is power, and I'm very inspired by the people who share their employment challenges and success stories. We're building a little more every day. Great. Now file a class action lawsuit and get compensated for all that unearned income you couldn't get to pay for food, bills, and healthcare. That's exactly what Taco Bell employees did. 500 workers were victims of wage theft. The company forced workers to quit their jobs, but keep working so they wouldn't get overtime. If they did work more than 40 hours a week, those hours were carried over to the next week, so they wouldn't be considered overtime. If workers asked to be paid for the overtime they earned, they were simply ignored. They filed a class action lawsuit because the practice was common in the company and affected more than 500 workers. The next story is how my company lost millions due to manager's ego. I'll try to make it short. We have a dude working in my team under my supervision, who's one of the few specialists in a very peculiar design software. Literally one of dozen or so in whole North America, who can properly operate and use it efficiently. As I said, software is very peculiar. We have other operators, but they mostly suck at it and make things worse, while this dude just plows through. Not their fault. The program is just terrible to use. Somehow this guy gets it. Thing is, he's a loner. He doesn't like Office or any of the team building BS. Dude wears black metal shirts and got in trouble with middle management many times, and then work from home came as a lifesaver for him. I do not care about his shirts or where he works, as long as he's doing it, and I talk to him about extending work from home forever. One guy less at stupid pizza parties will not matter. Dude is like, okay, salary is good and all, but do not make me come back. I will leave. So, a week or two after this, middle manager calls me in and spouts all this SH about the guy. How he's not a team player and he never comes in. His dress code is terrible and he's an introvert. I'm like, yeah, but you realize he is a major asset to the company. Literally brings us millions worth of work due to that software? Nah, he must come in. Company culture comes first to us. He was so angry about it like dude killed someone. He was just working from home, not bothering anyone. I could not believe it, and the same day got email from CEO office about the guy, and I got a warning for tolerating it. I was furious. So I called the man, told him all about it and apologized. He just said it's cool, dude. I got work offers daily. You'll get my resignation tomorrow. And he did send it. Management were out of their minds. How dare he do this? And guess what? We were in the middle of a bid worth $2 million, and we lost it to the company that this dude moved to. As a matter of fact, we lost a few more bids and management decided to pull out of that business side completely. All because of their egos and stubbornness, not willing to listen to the facts. They could have kept the guy working from home and earned millions more. But nah, company culture comes first. Most of the time, it's just their inflated ego and psychotic mindset of total control. They're so dumb, geez. With the amount of money he was bringing in, they could have paid for him tickets to all the black metal shows in the US and still have millions. Here's what I would have done. Would do anything to keep the guy happy while he's doing his thing. How or where he does it is totally irrelevant. But no, it has to be their way. And that's where it got them. Total jerks. And the last story is... got one over on my landlord. So my complex is on a busy road, and until recently everyone's mailboxes were just sitting there clustered together, and anyone could stop and empty them all in minutes. Just a couple dozen mailboxes all sitting out on a super busy road. I've lived here 3 years, and probably our first months living here, the sheriff showed up with our mail that they found shredded in a ditch. They showed up every 6 months or so now, to give all the tenants their mail. After fighting with my landlord about how unreasonable it is to have 24 unlocked mailboxes on a huge main road, just waiting to be burgled. I wasn't the only one who complained either. Everyone was sick of having the sheriff show up unannounced to deliver mail. He continually told me to pay for a P.O. box, and basically deal with being unable to receive mail at my home. I finally downloaded my local tenant handbook, and found out it's illegal to not provide locking mailboxes for tenants in my state. I called and left a message with the cited law, got a bunch of other tenants to also call him, and without a word a month later, he ignored me and every other tenant every time we called to see what was going on. They installed locking mailboxes. Effing win. D, man, that's really cool. Very glad you're able to win. But it's so freaking weird that they weren't lockable. They probably just save money on mailboxes thinking like, who's gonna need your mail? A-holes. Subscribe, hit the like button, and have a nice day.